So again, thank you everybody for being here. This is the third one of these sessions that I've done and as the leader of the Fractional Marketing channel. Um, I have been talking with Alan and we've kind of come up with some conversation for today around the connection between marketing and finance. And I think it'll be a really interesting conversation. So let's go ahead and get started. And then towards the end of this, we can open it up to the floor. People may have their own perspectives and viewpoints that they want to bring to the table or questions for Alan or anybody else here. So let's go ahead and get started. Alan, if you want to unmute yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then we can get into it.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. And thank you everybody for coming. Great to meet you all. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. So I'm Alan Gonsenhauser. My business is Demand Revenue. And I've also been on the Fractionals United board. I'm the marketing and growth representative to the Fractional United board and have been since the beginning with Karina. So it's a great group and nice meeting you all. So in terms of my background, I started in finance. I got my master's in corporate finance and investments way back when and started in customer administration. I started with Xerox, customer administration. Then I got into operational consulting in Xerox's corporate audit group. Then I got into market research and then product marketing, channel marketing, sales. And then I was hired by a competitor, by Panasonic, very early in my career. So I started in finance, but got into marketing relatively early in my career. Been in marketing and general management ever since, and I've been a chief marketing officer 11 times, seven full-time companies, and I spent 6 years at a company that used to be called Serious Decisions. Some of you may be familiar. They were a go-to-market firm for the marketing, sales, and product functions. They were taken over by Forrester. I stayed on with Forrester 2 years and I left 4 years ago and I started Demand Revenue. So what I do is I coach B2B CMOs to become indispensable strategic growth leaders for their companies. So I coach CMOs as I did with Serious Decisions. So I've coached over 150 CMOs in my time between the 6 years there and my time at Demand Revenue. I also come on as an interim CMO for private equity investors and their portfolio companies, and I help CMOs and chief customer officers with projects. So that's what I do, and a little about my background. So
Thanks, Alan.
yeah.
Maybe let's start off just talking a little bit about that transition from finance to marketing and sort of what um, angles you brought into the marketing role that connected into finance and how finance helped you in your marketing role.
Yeah, so when I first started, I had been, as I said, in customer administration and operational auditing, and I was always very interested in quantitative, ever since I got my master's degree. And, I was a teaching assistant in finance and statistics. So I got into market research, and market research was kind of my first entree into marketing. And I supported one of the product marketing groups with the market research I was doing. And that was my first entree to marketing. And I saw it was really interesting. And then I moved from the market research group to product marketing and, launched my first ever disruptive technologies in the market. And I learned that my finance background helped me on the quantitative side of marketing, the analytical and the data and operational efficiency and all that. And I learned the creative side. And so I think, marketing is very much, you know, right and left brain, creative and analytical. And the analytical part that it always helped me in marketing and get along very well with CFOs later in my career.
So let's talk a little bit about that more then. Like, I know a lot of times there is either a disconnect between the CMOs and the CFOs in companies, or even more than that, sort of a tension between
Yeah.
the two. How did you bridge that with the CFOs and the companies that you worked with? And what was it purely a language issue or an approach, a different approach?
It's a little bit of both. I think marketing leaders need to learn the language of business and the language of finance. And, it depends where you're from. If you've always been on the creative and marketing communications side and not on the analytical side, that transition may take more time and be a little bit more difficult. Um, and, a lot of mistakes I see marketing leaders make is they have a lot of vanity metrics, which are important within marketing. Like, how many likes did we get, or how many press releases did we send out? Things that are activities that marketing needs to do, but finance in the C-suite doesn't care. They care about the results, the outputs, and the impacts to the business. So it's framing what marketing does in a business standpoint. And it's thinking, not, if you're a marketing leader, not just that you're a leader of a function, but you are a strategic growth person. And the more you understand what the other functions need to do and what their key initiatives, strategic directions are, the more successful you'll be in marketing to get along with other functions and finance. And I would also say that, you know, there's certain metrics that really result in future financial performance, not looking in the rear view mirror. But if you look at creating remarkable customer relationships and bring on the right customers that are in your ideal customer profile, the ones you can keep, that's going to result in future financial performance that's more repeatable, better net revenue retention, better gross revenue retention, better upsell, cross sell, and future performance. And I never have an issue having that conversation with the CFO because
And
that's what they want to do as well.
and so I mean it comes for everyone, it comes down to revenue at the end and I guess profitability to some degree.
Yeah,
But those two groups don't always talk to each other. And I know you just said you never have trouble, but maybe you come from that background as two things, as a marketing person, but also as a fractional marketing person. How do we sort of get in there and how do we build that relationship and how do we talk the
yeah.
right language to those people? Those people.
Well, get some training on finance terms and business terms so you can speak that language and understand the financial statements of the company you work for, or the companies you work for if you're fractional. And meet the CFO, have a standing meeting once a month, get on the same page, work collaboratively to set a dashboard of a few business metrics that are meaningful to the business, and not vanity metrics, but things that, that really makes a difference in the business, and do it together. If you look on my website, demandrevenue.com, and you go to the blog section, I've written a few blogs on the relationship between the CFO and the CMO. And if you go to the podcast section, I was on the Grow CFO podcast talking about the CMO and the CFO relationship. So I have a lot of content on my website in on this particular topic. But it's speaking the same language, and it's, getting to know each other and meet with them and try to understand each other.
So,
That
not to put you on the spot, because I don't think I asked this question to you in advance, but do you have
that's
any
good.
examples of a company that you worked in? Maybe an example from a fractional perspective,
Yeah.
and specifically, what were you talking about, and what did you bring, and what were the reporting styles and that sort of thing? And how did that work?
I'll give you one example. I was interim CMO at a company called Brightly Software, which was about a 200 million um, software company, um, in that worked with building management and city management software. And I worked with the CFO to create a long-term plan. We were acquired by Siemens Infrastructure. So I was also helping to integrate into Siemens. And so I worked closely with the CFO to develop a plan and to get more budget um, to grow the business. And he said, "Hey, you're the only marketing person that's ever spoken about lifetime value to customer acquisition cost and the relationship there on future financial performance. You know, a lot of CMOs can get caught in the trap of just this year's demand performance and short-term performance to bring on new customers and new clients, which is more difficult than retaining and growing your existing customer base. So put some metrics together on lifetime value to customer acquisition cost, because the business was just focusing on CAC, on the cost to bring on new business. They weren't focusing on making sure that the folks you bring on are in your ideal customer profile. So you're going to keep them longer, you're going to retain them longer, you're going to have less churn, and over time it means more to your future performance, financial performance, than the short-term ones that you bring on board. So that was one thing. Um, Another thing is having a conversation about brand. Oftentimes, it's very difficult for CMOs or fractional CMOs to convince CFOs to invest in brand, but brand seeds your brand awareness and brand preference seeds demand early. And if companies in C-suites never heard of your company, it's going to be a lot more difficult to get on their short list. So there's a definite relationship between brand and demand. And in fact, if you speak to a CFO on brand equity impacts valuations. So there are ways to connect marketing and finance in ways that CFOs appreciate. Does
And
that help?
yeah, and do you see when you've had this conversation, so I'm curious about the brand measurement of brand equity because I think that's a very difficult thing to measure. Can you speak a little bit more about what you measured and how you showed the value of that to somebody who's coming from a financial perspective?
Yeah, that when you're measuring brand, I mean, you could do a very expensive brand study, and that takes a long time, and that's one way of doing it. But you can create other indicators too. I mean, it's not just brand awareness; it's awareness, preference. So, what do people associate with your brand, and its engagement? And you can create metrics around all of those. One metric of engagement would be like Net Promoter Score, or how happy are your customers with your brand and different elements of your brand. And you can do certain awareness and certain preference and creating metrics. I have a model that I use with clients that has a bunch of indicators that help you track how your brand is progressing in those three areas of reputation.
And have you had to translate what that means to the company in terms of how that relates to revenue long term? Meaning,
Yeah,
and what does that conversation look like?
it relates to win-loss analysis.
Hmm.
If companies know your brand and are positively just, are positive about your brand, you're going to be a lot more likely to be in deals and win deals on the front end. And if you're bringing on the right customers that are a great fit for your business, and you define your ideal customer profile and you make sure that not only marketing but sales and product and everybody's on the same page cross-functionally with who are the customers you want to bring on, because it'll be easier to acquire them and it'll be easier to retain them and grow them on the back end. A lot of it's about alignment.
Hmm.
And it's not just marketing and finance. It's aligning marketing, sales, product, finance, customer success.
Hmm.
So businesses are on the same page. And a lot of businesses have an issue with alignment, as
Hmm.
I'm sure everybody has seen. And that's a really important thing to fix
Yeah, we
because that helps you accelerate your growth and have more profitable and intelligent growth. Does that help, Michelle?
absolutely. Yeah, I think that's great. And you work a lot with when you were doing or as you're doing fractional roles, not in the coaching role necessarily, you work a
Yeah,
lot with, or maybe even in the coaching role, with PE-backed companies,
I
right?
do. I do a lot, especially when I'm an interim CMO or projects. I work a lot with private equity um, investors and their portfolio companies. So those are generally let's say north of 200 million. But when I work with CMOs, I can also work with CMOs at smaller companies as well. And I was an interim CMO for one Series A company, Linus Health, but generally I work with larger companies when I come on as an interim or fractional CMO. Um, my coaching and mentoring can be different. Like I have one now that's a $15 million company, and I'm coaching the marketing leader. Um,
So
so I can do
on the
smaller companies as well.
PE-backed companies, I'm assuming there's a different conversation. I mean, there's a whole different level of involvement and they're very much focused on bottom line and what are we
Yep.
doing to get this company in order and more efficient and all of that. How does that conversation go? Or do you stay connected to the PE contacts and what does that look like?
Well, with one private equity investor, I've worked with six of their portfolio companies. I've been interim CMO at four, and I've helped with, rebranding or other engagements at others. Um, and generally larger companies, private equity investors have a time frame. They have a value creation plan where they're trying to, bulk up the companies to sell them within, let's say, 5, 6, 7 years. So, a lot of it is about building infrastructure and a longer term plan. So by infrastructure, people, process, technology, data, analytics, pricing, and brand strength. So I work on those. So I'll usually do an assessment of infrastructure up front and, look at the positives and what the company's doing well and where the gaps are. And if I come on as an interim CMO, I will lead the marketing team and, be on the C-suite and work cross-functionally. But a lot of it is about looking at the infrastructure. I will say those types of deals that I get involved in are not as price sensitive as small companies. They're problem sensitive. So
Mhm.
generally when they bring me on board, there's a degree of pain or there's something that they need to do to ramp up the company and speed up the value creation
And
of the company.
are you seeing common problems or is it all different kinds of problems that you're
Oh
getting?
my, all kinds, brand, rebuilding the demand engine and MarTech stack, um, looking at the level of customer satisfaction, what the issues are, how they measure it, how they improve it, how they act on what customers are telling them. Tech debt because they've done a lot of acquisitions and they have to, get different instances of Salesforce consolidated or marketing automation systems. Carve outs where maybe you had a business that did both the services and the tech side and they just want the tech side. So spitting out, two new companies. There's all kinds of interesting stuff. One company I was about $1 billion health SaaS, not health, I'm sorry, HR tech SaaS company. I was helping them figure out their ideal customer profile and the organization design. A lot of it with these larger companies also is org design work. As they integrate companies or do a carve out, what centers of excellence should marketing have, and what's the relationship between the different functions, marketing, sales. I've seen, instances where obviously you've all seen this, marketing and sales don't work together. They're on different planets. So figuring out what the lead management process are, what the definitions are, um, of different types of leads and service level agreements. If marketing does a great job qualifying leads before they go to sales, how quickly should sales follow up? Bringing in intent information so you know when there are people looking for the types of products you're selling, either on your website or competitors' websites. So there's a lot, and a lot of alignment issues. And I'll say, it may be many of the issues may be similar to smaller companies, but just kind of they fester and they get bigger as companies scale. So trying to get them to the next level.
Got it.
Yeah.
How, practically, how do you do that? Like when you start with a company, are you talking to a lot of different people? Are you doing some
Yes.
research? Like what are the steps that you're taking to identify where you can then insert yourself?
I try to get to know people and not come on like I have the answers,
Mhm.
but develop relationships first and ask folks, what's working really well? What are you really proud of? And what do you think could be working better? And getting a range of people, not just marketing, but sales and product people in the C-suite, and trying to understand where they're coming from and what some of the, barriers might be to accelerating their success. And now we're talking about me working with companies as an
Mhm.
interim CMO or doing projects. When I work with chief marketing officers or marketing executives, it's a bit different.
Mhm.
Um, the
More of
way I
an
work with them
execution stuff.
is
Yeah,
it's a combination of marketing skills, but also leadership and communication and all that,
gotcha.
which because I've, been in that role so many times.
Have you, and this is kind of shifting gears a little bit, but have you been
Yeah.
in situations where the company purely sees marketing as a cost center and is not
Yes.
seeing it as a strategic part of the business? How do you deal with that?
I try to lightly educate people of what marketing is today and how it's changed. And some ways I've done that. A lot of people think marketing is just a, coin operated demand engine or, leads. Um, and I try to do this in the marketing reviews and the QBRs, quarterly business reviews. I first talk about what's going on in the market. What are the market forces? You know, positive and negative. Where are the headwinds? Where are the tailwinds? So start off with the market. But then I parse marketing into at least four areas. The first is reputation or brand reputation. What are those things we're doing, programs we're doing to enhance our brand reputation? The second is demand. And demand is not only new business logos, but it's upsell, cross sell of existing customers. What are we doing to drive demand, which is an important area, but a lot of companies have over rotated on demand. They don't look at reputation and brand. The third is customer engagement. Um, what are we doing to create advocates? What are we doing to improve gross revenue retention and net revenue retention? Do we understand what our customers feel about our brand? Where are the positives we can promote and where are the negatives that we need to fix things? And how are we going to do that cross-functionally?
Mhm.
And then finally, where are the programs to engage and make sales more productive? How are we enabling sales? How are we enabling customer success? So when I communicate that marketing is those five things, understanding the market, driving brand reputation, driving demand, um, customer relationships, and enabling sales and customer success, it it paints a wider picture of what marketing is and what marketing should be today. And
Okay,
people generally get that. They hear that a few times, they start to get it. Then you can parse each of your programs into those five areas to communicate what marketing is.
gotcha.
Not
So,
just, um, the arts and crafts department or a cost center.
right.
And I also, and this, with CMOs and CFOs getting along, CMOs need to be proactive and cut costs without being asked to, and show that they're a good steward of the budget that they have. I mean, and there are ways you can do that. You can do a content audit and cut out 70% of the content you're not using. You could look at how many agencies you have if you're a bigger company and maybe you have too many. You can look at your MarTech stack, and you may have a bloated MarTech stack where you have, you've chased a lot of squirrels, but you're really not using things to drive your business forward, and you can cut out some of those things that you don't need. You
Yep,
should be investing more in things that impact the customer and creates a wonderful customer relation, drive retention, because that's going to be what will impact your long-term growth and profitability.
got it. So good advice for when once you're in, right? And I think a lot of people on this call probably are still trying to get more clients, more pipeline for themselves.
Yeah,
And they want to position themselves more strategically, but there's some education that needs to take place because I know I've been, in situations where we just need more leads. We just need more leads for our salespeople. Come in and get us more leads. And it requires more than that. So, yes,
yeah,
when you're having to convince or you're having the conversation about coming potentially coming on board, how do you have that conversation? That's the hard one.
Well, I say marketing is not a coin-operated demand engine. You know, here are the things that are important in marketing. And if you're not doing these other things, you're missing the boat. It's not just demand. It's, you want to seed the market so they know who you are to make it easier to bring on new business. And it's not just the short-term business. It's what are you doing long-term? What's your churn? What kind of churn do you have? If you have a lot of churn, that points to a lot of issues. And that's one of the first things to fix. You can drive demand, but if you have a leaky bucket on the other end, you're not going to be successful financially.
Hmm.
So I try to look at it from a business standpoint. And if folks say, "No, we just want leads marketing," I say, "Oh, there are a lot of people that do that. That's, I can help you with that as one element of it, but if that's all you want out of someone you're bringing on board, I think you need to bring on someone that's a lot more tactical and not strategic."
Yep, makes sense.
Yeah.
So we're gonna, if anybody wants to start, if you have any questions or any thoughts on any of the conversation that we've had here, you have some of your own thinking and how you've approached it, please either add it to the chat or raise your hand. But while you guys are thinking about that, maybe if we can just sort of leave sort of advice or reflections on how bringing this back to the finance piece of it at the having those conversations, what sort of is your overarching advice to fractionals who are probably mostly working with smaller companies? I'm not sure that most of the people on the call are working with the larger, but some. Just sort of what would you leave people with as advice on getting business and keeping business and having those good high level conversations with the right people?
Well, first conversation with CFO, get to know the CFO and see what they're driving to and what they're trying to do and how marketing can fit into that. And make sure that, sorry about my dogs, and they hear something. So, make sure that the marketing goals that you're working on are aligned with the business goals and the strategic goals, and you have an aligned strategy. In terms of getting business as a fractional, your other question, it, it my advice would be define a narrow niche. Think about the kind of problems you've seen throughout your career that you've solved over and over again. You can almost solve them in your sleep. You've seen them so many times. So think about those types of problems and reflect on what size businesses were they, what industries were they in, and define a narrow niche where it's kind of like ICP. Define your ICP, a narrow niche where you have a lot of experience solving problems and it comes almost second nature to you because you've done it a lot in your career in other roles. That's the first thing. Second thing is then work your network. If you combine those two things, a narrow focus and really work your network well, you're going to be more successful because you're going to be more pointed, you're going to be more focused, and folks that know you and know what you can do because they have experience with you are the folks that you should be reaching out to. You
Awesome.
can prioritize your network. You can look at on two axes. You can look at your relationship, really strong relationship, okay relationship or weak, and then whether someone's a decision maker on the other axis or an influencer. And your network core ought to be those people that you have a strong relationship with or a decent relationship that are either decision makers or influencers to decision makers on projects. And if you focus on those in your network and you sharpen your value proposition to things that you know how to do well, problems you've seen that you know how to solve in size of company and markets, you'll be more successful at business development in my
Thank,
opinion.
thank you, Alan. George, I think you had a question related to AI native marketing teams.
Yeah. First of all, Alan, great perspectives. Thank you for sharing them with us. I
My
really,
pleasure.
I like the idea of being proactive and approaching in terms of bridging the finance marketing gap. I love the idea of being proactive and and having marketing identify opportunities for cost savings. One of the things I recognize is with this shift from kind of the traditional marketing org to a AI native, modern AI native marketing organization, just the way AI is reshaping everything we can do. It seems like there's an opportunity to significantly reduce the cost of a marketing team, the headcount, by outsourcing a lot of those functions, whether it's content, creative, copywriting, other stuff to freelancers, contract stuff, to focus on keeping a smaller, more cost-effective, more nimble, AI-oriented team in-house. Anyway, I'm just curious to know whether that's a trend you're seeing and whether that's an opportunity you think we should be trying to leverage or focus in on as fractional CMOs.
Well, overall, I would say AI either works for us or we work for AI. So, you know,
Yeah.
and the models are getting better and better, really great. I mean, I'm using Claude quite a bit to generate some content, but you have to look at it very carefully afterwards.
Mhm.
And you have to be what I call a good promptologist. Your prompts have to be good. So you have to train it. But when you do, it's a great tool. So I think like any disruptive innovation, you have to embrace it. And I think it's really important for fractionals or full-time people to really embrace AI and learn what it can do for you. I'm finding it's really helpful in content writing, in research, even in getting um, like people would normally find you through a search engine. It's important to train the AI models so they can find you through AI as well. My latest client, first one from the web, found me by doing a chat GPT search, then went to my website, and now they're a client. It's the first time that's happened. I just came out with a new website a couple days ago, and this new web developer put something on there that I think helped as well. But
Hmm.
um, yes, I think not only in marketing but in other functions as well, um, it's going to be important for people to get comfortable with AI, to leverage AI. And yes, will that reduce costs over time in some areas like content development and research? I think it's inevitable. But those folks that embrace AI and learn how to wield it effectively and prompt it effectively will be successful. But you need to do that. If not, you might be left behind.
Yeah.
Does that help, George?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yes.
I think there's a whole discussion to be had with somebody out there. So if anybody out there has any ideas on this, but just about how they're using or how they're creating an AI native marketing team, I'd be curious to see that. And I think as a fractional, that could be very powerful. And being able to come in as a fuller package at lower cost might be interesting. But anyway, I think that's sort of
Yeah, that's the heart of the question I think I'm not wrestling with, but advocating in some clients, right? There are a number of job postings that they're hiring a new full-time CMO or VP of marketing, and I'm
Yeah.
thinking, hey, you don't, in today's day and age with AI, you don't need a full-time one. In fact, I can present you with a model that's a fractional CMO and a modern AI native marketing team that is less expensive, and you can use some of those savings to invest in other things, whether it's demand gen or programs or R&D or whatever.
Yeah.
But just it's a paradigm. I think it feels like we're possibly at a paradigm shift in terms of what that marketing org can look like.
And what company sizes do you work with, George,
So
typically?
my focus is climate tech, clean tech, but more early stage, startup early stage
Okay.
to growth stage. That's what I'm targeting. But so some of them wouldn't necessarily be yet at a stage of needing full time, but some of them definitely think they're at a stage where they
Yeah.
need full time. And I'm trying to tap the brakes and say, you know what, there's a different model, and AI is accelerating the ability to implement that kind of a model.
Yeah. Well, generally smaller companies are a lot more price sensitive, so would be, I think that's a good model for them. That's
Yeah.
typically not who I target.
Yeah.
The companies I work with typically, at least when I'm corporate, are larger companies that are not as price sensitive. They're problem sensitive. So I don't really compete on price really with
Yeah.
my audience. Um, but no, I think that's a good strategy for smaller companies.
But even in those larger companies, are you positioned as a fractional or as an interim?
I generally uh, I've generally come on as an interim
Yeah.
where I am the CMO for a period, 6 months, let's say, or more. And then when the new CMO is hired, in one case, I stayed on another 14 months as their coach and
Right.
advisor,
Yeah.
which I love doing because, you invest so much in a company, you learn them
Right.
really well. But no, I position myself more with the I word than the F
Right.
word, um,
Okay.
personally.
Yeah. Because during that 6 months, you're probably essentially full time, right? That is,
I won't do any more than 4 days a week because you always
40,
have to
right.
have some for business development,
Okay.
but 3 to 4 days a week is pretty much full time. Yeah.
Okay. I've taken up enough airtime. Let's let
Thank you,
others
George.
ask
No,
Yeah,
that's
here.
great.
No,
great
Great
points.
question. Thank you, George.
Richard, you had a question here about meeting the CFO early on, or at least a finance forward person early on.
Yeah. Hi. Good afternoon. Welcome. I'm calling in from the UK, so it's
Great.
almost the end of the week because it's a short week this week. So I'm
Nice.
nearly done.
Enjoy.
Um. Yeah. Well, Alan, I'm a big fan of your LinkedIn newsletter that I get.
Oh, thank you.
And I was really pleased to see that you've been asked to speak at this event. So thank you very much for all that you do for us. Yeah. My question is really, and I was just it was while you were talking that I thought about this that in all the fractional CMO gigs that I've had, I don't think I've ever met the CFO or the finance director until I've got in the door. And I wonder if that's too late. I wonder if, I should be seeing that CFO as part of the sort of the pitch process, if you like.
I like to for that reason and for another reason too. If I'm working with a CEO and or the board and the CEO and private equity, I like meeting the CFO because I want to make sure I'm going to be paid on time, and I set up a cadence of being paid, and I
Yeah.
find out I get on their systems and I find out who the accounts payable clerk's going to be
Yep.
that processes it each month, and I'll befriend them so I can ask them when is it coming, and so I want to make sure that once we start all that's going to be set up, and that's usually a good conversation with the CFO because it's in their area. But it's a great idea to get to know the CFO when you start and let them know you're not the average marketing person, that you want to work with them, and cross-functional alignment is important. And find out what's important to them, how they perceive of marketing, and where they think some of the strengths are and where some of the gaps are. You can get some really good information from them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're probably very good at finding the gaps, right?
Yeah. Well, then you'll also find out what their personality profile is
Yeah.
and how they think, and it won't hurt, and it'll be good for starting a relationship, and you'll probably surprise them by doing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
what I'm hearing maybe is a seek to understand conversation with the CFO, not necessarily
Yeah.
trying to convince them that you're the person that they need to hire, but just trying to understand where they're coming from. And I think that speaks a lot.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. Agreed. Thank you.
awesome. Paul, did you want to add anything? I know you put a link in the chat here, but is there anything you wanted? I think it's more probably on the AI discussion earlier, but did you want to add any thoughts on that? Paul is still on.
Hello.
Oh, there you are.
Oh, hi. Yeah, yeah. Thanks for your note. I just, when he was talking about the AI discussion, I just quickly posted that. I mean, it's a little wonky, but I do that all the time. I mean, using AI to save costs
Yeah.
and be more efficient, right? And I just had AI build a calculator for me, and you can play with it if you want. But it's still about ROI and everything, and being able to make changes easily without thinking about, oh, we just spent 10,000 on an ebook and it's not working, right? I'm just saying it's now you can do more testing and more messaging and more strategy with it, and not be afraid to test because it's more efficient to use AI. Obviously you got to always use the human element and make sure it's accurate, but
Yeah. There is
like
hallucination.
like we said, though, I call it like my director of ideation, right? And, so, and that's why I put that up there, just kind of like showing people like with different metrics is, here's what you're doing now, here's what you could be doing, or a compromise in the middle as far as saving costs and building ROI and making the messages more personalized and
Yeah.
more compelling. And I always talk about that. Like, let's say a prospect has three pain points, so now you can do, three funnels, three lead magnets, whatever, targeting each audience and test them and not worry about, you know, how much did we spend on that? Now it's a lot more efficient and you can make changes a lot quicker.
And are you using that as a tool to convince potential clients or clients to work with you?
Yeah, I think a big picture, because that's kind of like my brand, right? Is more efficient and more effective and more personal marketing and lead generation. So yeah, it's always part of my proposals. It's kind of like my brand now, really. It's from a marketing side anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
Is the more better, faster mentality, right? Especially for small businesses that, listen, I went through many years, with writers and before AI, of course, and you're spending 8 to 10, whatever, how much you're spending on a really good content writer, and they're great people, right? But I'm sure they feel stressed too, and then getting it designed instead of Fiverr using your real designer, right? And
Yeah.
so then you're looking at a 15,000 ebook and then say, did it work? Well, versus being nimble, but still just as effective if you do it the right way and manage it.
Thank you. Thanks
To
for
help.
coming forward and for the link. If anybody looks at the chat, you'll find the link there. Let's see, Andrea, is that how you say it? Andrea, you had a question about branding and awareness from CFOs on the importance and the value.
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right. Sorry, I think Microsoft went mic went on standby. Can you hear me?
It's a little scratchy, but we can hear you,
All right.
Andre.
Let's try it. 1 second. So I guess the question I have, I think in the marketing community in general, we see a lot of conversations and we see it daily in many ways. AI sort of lowering the barrier to entry for a lot of tactics. Someone talked about ebook just now. That can be generated in a few minutes these days, right? So the value of some of these tactics is certainly going away, or at least is decreasing rapidly. Most markets are seeing a lot of competition. I work with a lot of SaaS companies. Think of all the AI SaaS startups out there,
Yeah.
right? Every niche has 50 AI SDR agent, startups in it. So branding becomes an important differentiator, and sort of thinking about how do you stand out from that crowd. In your conversations with CFOs, do you see increased level of that understanding, or are they still sort of thinking in terms of cost savings and so on?
Depends on the CFO. I mean, some just think of cost savings, but no one ever reduced themselves into greatness. I think with all the AI tools out there, I have two thoughts. One is you need to engage them. They're great. And by the way, if anybody knows the best tool to generate ebooks, I'd love to know. But
It changes weekly.
I'm sure it does. Yeah. But no, I'd like to do some ebooks, but I'm not sure which one to use. But anyway, I have a tip for everybody before we finish on how you can save a lot of money with AI. So remind me before we finish. But part of it is you need to embrace it. It's disruptive innovation. You need to become good at it. You need to spend the time with it, or you're going to be left behind. The other element of that is I think all this AI ML stuff, you know, people are going to want more genuine interaction with people. Human interaction is going to become more important because people might be like so much AI, so much content everywhere, having discussions like this where you're speaking with a person and it's not AI generated. I think it's going to become more important to know what's real and what's fake, or at least what, I think being human and reaching out to people and having personal conversations like this is going to be more important in the age of AI.
The fact that AI is impacting finance as well.
Oh yeah, it's impacting all organizations. So I think, not just between finance and marketing, but I think strategically the C-suite's gonna and the board are dealing with those kinds of situations. So I think it's incumbent upon marketing to communicate how important branding is and the different ways to brand and what we need to do. And it can't all happen through AI. Um, but these are conversations people are going to have on every function, not just marketing and finance. Yeah.
Think so.
So who was
Can
next?
you
Someone else had a
hear
question?
I think I'm next. Hi, Alan. First,
Hi.
very nice to meet you and great
You
session.
too, Jenny.
I loved where you talk about, being a marketer, you also need to be metrics driven. And in fact, I think because my role previously as an ecom marketer, you definitely see a lot of that marketing and translation into revenue. So
Yes.
completely, you're speaking to my heart. So my question for you is, and this is something I noticed in my experience, especially with larger companies where they're used to working a certain way, you're more traditional in the way they work, they're not necessarily understand that they need to embrace AI. They understand the importance of AI. They don't know how to approach it. Sometimes they outsource it to their IT division or their tech leads. And then you're very much and then they have a very tedious process to onboard new vendors.
Right.
Um, which I've had to deal with quite a bit, and it's really slow. So, and then in terms of startups, and this is an area I'm just starting to kind of tip my toes into it. They are obviously budget conscious and they want to use their money wisely and effectively. So, one is how do you keep up with this ever-changing AI trends?
Yeah.
It's like every day there are, 10,000 new things coming up. And two, uh, it's almost like how do you figure out what you don't know, right? Because sometimes you don't know what you don't know and you're not even looking
Yeah.
in the direction. But first of all, how do you identify these blind spots? And then how do you go out there and identify the right AI partner, the vendors who can help you to test, um, when you have limited time or budget or even area to
Yeah.
experiment in?
I see there's two questions. The first question was bigger companies and then smaller. So the well, first of all, I think across both, you want to find good AI trainers. I know some really good people that are doing amazing things with AI that are training companies. Even one of them is training Microsoft
Oh, wow.
on AI. As big as Microsoft is with Pilot and everything, they need train. So she trains marketing staffs on AI at a lot of bigger companies. So you want to have to, and depending if you're a bigger company, if you're a Microsoft house or something else, Microsoft has AI models you can use and keep your data in-house so you don't risk it going all over the internet. So there are ways of doing that with bigger companies. I know a lot, when you're talking to a CISO, a chief information security officer, a CIO, or IT, they tend to be a lot more conservative, and then they're worried about people using it, and I've seen that in a billion-dollar company. I saw that recently, where they were struggling with that, how to use AI, how to put them in products, and you know, so I think training is a big part of the answer there on what's possible and what makes sense for the particular company. And it's a large part, are they a Microsoft house or are they something else, which will govern what they might use. For smaller companies, I think it's the same. And I think it's not trying to use every AI model and use too many, but get good at a couple of them. Like ChatGPT is getting better and better, and Claude and some others. I promised a tip. Let me give you all a tip before I forget. So, anybody familiar with something called Join Secret? Okay. If you go to joinsecret.com and there's a 25% off, and I don't get anything from this. So I'm just, there's a 25% off you can get. If you join it for a year or forever, I joined it forever, you get discounts on all kinds of um, software and tools. Amazing. It's joinsecret.com. One of those tools is you.com. And if you join Secret, you get you.com free for a year. You.com has many of the AI models on it. Not just ChatGPT, but the $100 a month version of ChatGPT that does deep research. So if you join Secret and then you join you.com for a year for free, you'll get all of those AI models for free. So I just did that. So there's a little tip if you want to save some money as a fractional. That could save you a lot of money. And it's amazing how many different software things you could get discounts on if you join Secret. So there's my tip for the day.
That's the tip of the day.
Save you all some money.
If there's any other questions, let me know. But I think we're going to be wrapping up right now. It seems to me there's a lot of interest in the AI marketing tools
Sure.
side of things based on this conversation. Obviously, it relates to cost savings. It relates to being able to bring a better package as a fractional CMO, and it relates to finance. So in some ways, it related to this conversation. But I appreciate you, Alan, for sharing your wisdom with us today. And
My pleasure.
thank you, everybody who joined us. And we'll chat in Slack.
Nice meeting you all. Take care. Have a
Bye-bye.
great week.